Well, ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, we have a special guest here today. As you can see, our Congresswoman Harriet Hageman is in town, and I begged her to come give us a few words today. I know she's really busy, but she was gracious enough to give us a couple minutes of her time. Will you please welcome our Congresswoman Harriet Hageman?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It is wonderful to be here. I did not intend to do this. I was down in the basement meeting with the Civil Air Patrol. I've had an opportunity today to meet with quite a few different constituents and constituent groups. I'm going to be leaving here and actually going to meet with the FFA, which I'm looking forward to, especially since that was something I did while I was growing up. I won't take a lot of your time. I know that you're terribly busy working on the budget. It's wonderful to be back here and see so many friendly faces, so many people that I've known for a long time, even some who served with my father. And it's great to be in this beautiful, beautiful building. Thank you for having me. A couple of things. One, we had a terrible tragedy this week in Washington, D.C. with the plane accident. I know that we're going to find out what happened there. My heart goes out, my prayers go out to the family members who have been affected by that. My plane left out of DCA just a few short hours before that happened. I know that area well, and I realized when I flew over the Potomac on Wednesday that if anybody did go into that river, it was going to be terribly difficult to survive, simply because we've had terribly brutal weather back there. It was so cold and so full of ice. It is just a terrible tragedy, and I wanted to mention that. As far as some of the work that we're doing, as you probably have heard, we're working on what's called reconciliation, which is a budget effort that will go through both the House and the Senate. Why it's special and why it's important for us to get this right is if we do it right, we only have to have a majority vote in both the House and the Senate. We do not have to have the 60 votes in the Senate to be able to accomplish what we need to do. We all know that the federal government needs to cut spending. We're $36 trillion in debt, and we need to fundamentally change the way that we think about the federal government. I look at the folks in this room, and I know that every single one of you have the best interest of your constituents at heart. And not only do you care about them because they're your constituents and they live in your areas, but you also know so many of them personally. And that's the way that our government was set up. Our government was set up that the government should be as close to the people as possible, because then it's more responsive, more accountable, more responsible. And I can tell you from having been in DC now for a couple of years that so many people down there not only don't know any of your constituents, they don't necessarily care whether they're taking care of them or not. So I want to bring the power back to you. I trust every single one of you to make good decisions, not only on behalf of the people within your own communities, but for the people throughout the entire state of Wyoming, and really throughout the entire western United States. And then when you think about what we do on a national scale, we are really the linchpin in terms of the future of this country with what we have from an energy standpoint. That's why I have already introduced what's called the Coal Act. What that would do is require the Secretary of Interior to start issuing coal permits, and I know that's very important to the folks up in northeastern Wyoming, up in Eric's area, Senator Barlow's area. It is incredibly important that we're able to continue to pursue coal mining in this state, not only because it is affordable and reliable, but our national defense really depends upon it. Energy security is national security, and it is important that we make sure that we protect these interests. The same with our oil and gas, with our uranium, and the other mining that we do, Trona, et cetera. Those are the things that I focus a lot on. I focus a lot on our recreation and our irrigators and our farmers and ranchers. I am the chairman of the subcommittee on water, wildlife, and fisheries within the Natural Resources Committee, and in that role, we account for about 60 to 70% of the work that comes through that committee. So hopefully, we will be able over the next 2 years to do some fundamental reform of the Endangered Species Act, as well as NEPA, which will also help Wyoming dramatically. So those are the things that I will focus on there. I have stayed on the Judiciary Committee, and we will continue to be investigating both the last administration as well as providing oversight with the current administration, and we will be working a lot on the immigration issues that are going to be coming across our desk. I believe that H.R. 2 will be split up to a certain extent. Some of it will find its way into reconciliation, but to the extent it doesn't, it's imperative that we make sure that we're protecting our borders and that we are protecting the homeland, which is largely what the Judiciary Committee committee does in the immigration space. So those are just some of the things that we've done. Several of you have been back to Washington, D.C. It is always a joy to host you back there, have the opportunity to visit with you, talk to you about the issues that are important. I would encourage you to come back, either individually or with a group, and make sure that you're engaging with us. I can only do my job well if I know what's going on in Wyoming and I can engage with you about the issues that are important to our state. So please make sure that you stay in touch with me, stay in touch with my staff. If your constituents have federal issues, whether it is dealing with the IRS or the Social Security Administration or the VA, whatever it may be, please get a hold of my staff. My staff is absolutely second to none, and they will help the constituents. They are very dedicated to helping people here in Wyoming. So it's wonderful to see you all. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to chat with you for a little bit today. Have a great session, and I look forward to working with each and every one of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Congresswoman Harriet Hageman, for visiting with us. Thank you. Reports from standing committees.
Mr. President, the following reports are dated January 31, 2025. Your committee number 4, Education, to whom is referred Senate File 137, School Finance, Cash Reserves, respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Brennan, Olson, Rothfuss, Schuler, and Scott. Senator Schuler, Chairman. Your committee number 4, Education, to whom was referred Senate File 162, Education Block Grant Model Amendments. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Brennan, Olson, and Scott. No, Senators Rothfuss and Schuler. Senator Schuler, Chairman. Your committee number 4, Education, to whom was referred Senate File 123, School Finance Competitive Grants for Crossing Guards. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Brennan, Olson, Rothfuss, Schuler, and Scott. Senator Schuler, Chairman. Your committee number 7, Corporations, Elections, and Political Subdivisions, to whom is referred Senate File 165, Cancellation of Registration Notice Amendments. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Boner, Case, Landon, and Steinmetz. Excused, Senator Dockstader. Senator Case, Chairman. Your committee number 7, Corporations, Elections, and Political Subdivisions, to whom is referred Senate File 166, Political Party Formation Amendments. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Boner, Case, Landon, and Steinmetz. Excused, Senator Dockstader. Senator Case, Chairman. Your committee number 7, Corporations, Elections, and Political Subdivisions, to whom is referred Senate File 171, City and County Regulatory Reduction. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Boner, Case, Landon, and Steinmetz. Excused, Senator Dockstader. Senator Case, Chairman.
Thank you, Randy. Chairwoman Schuler, do you have a re-referral for me by chance? Gosh. I'll do my best, Johnny Carson. I think it's Senate File 123.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. Yeah, you are exactly right. I would like to request that Senate File 123 be referred to appropriations. Thank you.
Thank you. Absent objection, Senate File 123 is re-referred to Committee Number 2, Appropriations. Ladies and gentlemen, there's a resolution over here on the desk for you to sign if you so choose during Committee of the Whole. Chief Clerk asked that I would remind you if you are interested in signing that. Okay. On to General File. Madam Majority Floor Leader, we're at that order of business of consideration on Senate File 1. Oh, we lost her. The elusive Majority Leader. We'll stand it. Oh, Vice President.
In my mind, I did it.
Oh, I'll give you over to that microphone.
Mr. President, in my mind, I've already said these words and we have begun Senate File 1, but Mr. President, I move that the Senate resolve itself into Committee of the Whole.
You've heard them, what? To consider
Senate File 1.
Senate File 1. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no? No. Oh, get up here, Senator Hicks. You're not getting off the hook that easy. Motion carried.
Committee of the Whole will come to order. The reading clerk will read the Senate file. I don't have it yet.
Senate File 1, General Government Appropriations, sponsored by the Appropriations Committee.
Senator Salazar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the honorable members, we are obviously going into Senate File 1, the supplemental budget. I do want to give a reminder as we go into second reading and third reading that all amendments are due to LSO Legal by the end of Committee of the Whole on Monday. And I will repeat that in a couple hours, but I just want you to be aware, and I'll repeat it now. All amendments are due to the LSO legal staff by the end of Committee of the Whole on Monday for second reading. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so with a recommendation that Senate File 1 do pass. And for an explanation of the bill, Mr. Chairman, I ask that you call on members of the Appropriations Committee. Thank you.
Thank you. For the first explanation, we're going into Agency 1, Office of the Governor. Senator Driscoll.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Before we go into Agency 1, I'm going to kind of go through a couple of handouts that are on your desk. So part of you folks have been here a long time, but the first handout is a glossary page. So for anybody who hadn't done it, this is all the different terms that go throughout the budget. I encourage all of you to take a look at the budget, but it goes through all the different terms and all the things that you're going to be hearing, not necessarily here, but all the way through. And in particular, the expenditure series. And you're going to hear those today as we go through the budget. So 100 series, the expenditure series is a major group of line item expenditure codes that provide details of the type of transactions outlined below, sometimes referred to as object series. Series 100 is personnel costs, which are salaries and benefits. 200 non, if you read that, so you'll know when we talk about series of the different end of it. The next line below that's flex authority, and that's the next I'm going to go into because we've got some pretty long explanations in the summary sheet as far as the flex authority. And so here's the way the flex authority kind of works is we have 3 agencies that have super flex, and that allows them to move money between those lines. Those agencies are the DEQ, Department of Environmental Quality, the Department of Corrections, DOC, and the Department of Health. And those agencies are allowed super flex. So when they have money, you'll see that they may have something in one line. They're allowed to actually transfer it back and forth within that line. Then we have 8 agencies that have what we call mini flex. And that is a very specifically targeted, and that's the areas we have. And on the other sheet, you'll see where there's 8 different instances that mini flex were used. And we forbid the governor last year to do that. He line itemed those out. So when you hear mini flex here, what it means is we're reinserting our authority to stop that flex between or to make them do a mini flex only in very specific instances. So with that, I'm going to go into the budget. You can either have your budget or the summary report. Summary report's the long big page. It's kind of the summary. The budget's the long piece of it. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I bring you section 1, Office of the Governor, on page 1 of the summary sheet and page 5 of the budget bill. This is the Office of the Governor, and what the JAC did with the governor's budget was on line 1, it'd be the brown on your summary sheet down at the bottom below. They specified that no funds from public school foundation program account or any other source will be expended for contract services or state personnel relating to the liaison with the Wyoming Charter School Authorizing Board. That was the charter position. The governor actually funded that position while we were not in session and did not really have the authority to do so. JAC revoked the authority to do that, and that's what that footnote does. The next one is we decreased the governor's recommendation of $1 million general fund one time by $800,000 general fund to $200,000 for the state hazard mitigation plan. They decreased the governor's recommendation of $5,200,000 general fund one time by $5 million general fund to $200,000 general fund for an efficiency study on the Wyoming Innovation Partnership, WIP. Footnote 7, they exempted the appropriation for the third phase of the WIP program. That was the final phase of it, they just eliminated it. On line 7, decreased the governor's recommendation of $7,500,000 general fund one time by $3,900,000 general fund to a total of $3,600,000 general fund for natural resource litigation, and move this appropriation section 345. What that does is means that that money can only be used for contract lawyers. On line 8, they adopted the governor's recommendation of $2,500,000 general fund one time for protection and adjudication of interstate water rights, and added footnote 15, which specified the funds can only be used for legal counsel. That concludes my remarks. If there's no questions, Mr. Chairman, I'd stand for questions on Section 1, Office of the Governor.
Senator Hutchins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like Senator Driscoll to go over the footnote number 1. Just give me more specifics on what, it sounds like no public funds shall be expended for charter schools, if you just look at it, in my eyes. But a charter school is a public school, so if you could explain that a little bit deeper for me. Thank you, sir.
Further questions? Mr. Chairman, thank you, Senator Hutchins. What this does, if you look closely at it, it says for contract services or personnel, and this was the governor actually created and filled a position of a liaison to the charter school board, and that position was filled and is in place, and the JAC did not like this. Maybe the first time in history the governor's created a position in the middle without authorization. The JAC took that away. Without saying too much, you'll see an amendment come so that we can keep that position filled, but we've removed it for this time. With that, I'd stand for further questions or ask for the section proposed.
Senator Steinmetz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a little further explanation on footnote number 8 in the summary sheet as to, is this for the Colorado River Basin, the whole state? What seems to be the issue there? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I may have to phone a friend on that one. I was not on the Appropriations Committee. Senator Grew perhaps might know, or I could.
Senator Salazar.
Thank you,
phoned
Mr.
a
Chairman.
friend.
It's my understanding that these are all Wyoming water rights. That's my understanding, so.
Any other questions on Agency 1, Office of the Governor? No further questions. That concludes the explanation of Section 1. Hearing no further questions, Section 1 is closed. Next section for our consideration is Section 2, Secretary of State, Senator Driscoll.
Mr. Chairman, I bring you Section 2, Secretary of State on, I don't have the page numbers here, page 1 of your summary sheet, and I don't have the, well, there isn't, it's not in the other end of it. So folks, these that are this way, they're not actually in the other end because what happened. Secretary of State had come with a request for 3 additional positions. JEC made a couple different attempts to try to figure out how to solve that, and the ultimate result was no action was taken whatsoever. So Secretary of State stays just the same as it has been. With that, I'd stand for questions.
Any questions on Section 2, Secretary of State? No questions. The next section for our consideration is Section 3. No, excuse me, is Section 4, State Treasurer's Office. For an explanation, Senator Driscoll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Folks won't have to be listening to me for much longer, and I'm about done. So, Mr. Chairman, I bring you Section 4, State Treasurer, on page 2 of your summary sheet and page 12 of the budget. This is the Treasurer's Office. Folks, what we did with this is the first amendment is on number 2 in brown, and it was just a technical correction and went on. But what we really did with all of these amendments, we created 5 new positions in the Treasurer's Office. These will be new ongoing positions. 1 position in unclaimed property, 2 senior investment officers, 1 investment officer, and 1 accounting analyst. And what's happened is as our state funds have grown and our needs have grown, the treasurer felt the need to have new positions. The JEC agreed, and those positions we followed the governor's rec and went along, and that's where we're at. I would stand for questions or ask that the section be closed.
Any questions on Section 4, State Treasurer? This concludes the explanation on Section 4, State Treasurers. Hearing no further questions, Section 4 is closed. The next section for our consideration is Agency Number 6, A&I, Administration and Information. Senator Driscoll.
Mr. Chairman, I bring you Section 6, Administration and Administration, on page 3 of your summary sheet and page 14 of the budget. Folks, what this did was footnote 2, it dictates to the, directs to the Capital Square Preservation Account, $313,954 to ensure that the state capitol stays open on Saturdays and extended weekday hours during the summer and for special events. So we've been having trouble keeping it open. Just make sure the funding goes to where it's supposed to, capital account, keeps it open. The next one down is JEC denied the governor's rec of $271,600 general fund, of which $70,000 one time, and 3 full-time equivalent positions for custodial, groundskeeping, and snow and ice removal services for new property acquisitions. Those positions would have been for the Riverton office building and the office building, which is the DEQ building downtown here in Cheyenne. And this leaves them unstaffed at this point in time, or short-staffed at a bare minimum. The next one down is dealing with the same ones, but it was for 2 full-time equivalent positions for trade specialists. And those really were for both of the buildings. Those were actually your maintenance people, and we denied that end of it. And that's the end of that agency. I'd stand for questions or ask for the agency to be closed.
Questions? If there's no further question, that concludes the explanation of Section 6, Administration and Information. That section is closed. The next section for our consideration is Section 8, Office of the Public Defender. Chairman Salazar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I bring you Section 8, which is on page 3 of the SR and page 16 on the budget bill. As you can see, honorable senators, this is completely zeroed. What the JEC amended, though, was footnote 1 to exempt the appropriation from Section 347. Section 347 is actually a restoration of Section 307. It is a mini-flex agency, but again, as you can see, there's zeros across the board. I stand for any questions. That concludes my presentation on Section 8.
Okay, it concludes the explanation on Section 8. Hearing no further questions, Section 8 is closed. The next section for our consideration is Section 10. Oh, you're going to back up. We got a question. Senator Hutchins.
Just a comment, Mr. Chairman, I like that the Vice President brought up which item was a mini flex. If they can continue to do that, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Senator. Again, Section 8 is Office of the Public Defender is closed. The next section for our consideration is Section 10, Department of Agriculture. Chairman Salazar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do bring up Section 10, Department of Agriculture, which can be found on page 4 in the SR or page 17 in the budget bill. Again, it's pretty straightforward. The JAC simply amended footnote 4 to specify that the 1 million SR may come from the Game and Fish Fund for special projects related to predator control. The governor vetoed it. We're putting it back in. That's it. So, stand for any questions.
Questions on Section 10, Department of Agriculture? No question. That concludes the explanation on Section 10, Department of Agriculture. The next section for our consideration is Section 11, Department of Revenue. Senator Grew.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I bring you Section 11, the Department of Revenue. It's on the summary report on page 4 and in your budget on page 19. If you could look, if you're on the summary report, if you look down to the 2 footnotes, start with footnote number 2. JAC adopted the Gov's rec of 10.5 general fund, 10.5 million general fund one time for the property tax relief program. The budget request is on the original budget on page 14. That's a program that was oversubscribed, as we've talked about, and so this is the 10.4 to bring that up to speed. And then the first footnote is JAC adopted the Gov's rec of $75,000 one time for contract services for that same program. Those are the only changes in that department, and I'd be glad to stand for questions.
That concludes the explanation of Section 11, Department of Revenue. That section is closed. Next section for our consideration is Section 15, Attorney General.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I bring you Section 15, and while that's not in your budget book, it is on page SR page 5. And just wanted to kind of highlight this while I say it's not in the budget book itself. The JAC declined the Gov's rec, including a technical correction to reduce one-time benefits by $18,792 general fund to a total of $809,789 general fund, of which $101,778 general fund dollars is one time, and 2 full-time equivalent positions for the Attorney Generals to assist with the FNRPA account. So we denied that, and that is on the original budget request, page 14.
Hey, questions? Senator Cole.
Could there be a further explanation on the denial of the 2 FNRPA attorneys and an explanation just why that was thought to be the right thing to do? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's a great question. There was a lot of discussion amongst the JAC on that. And you're going to see this all the way through the budget. There was a very, very pronounced desire with the majority of the JAC to keep our employee count down and keep our expense account on employees down, whether contract employees, AWACS, or general fund. And this is one spot where the JAC, and like minds can differ, and JAC felt that in this particular case, that these funds were not necessary and it could be kept in-house, or they had other resources available to do that job.
Senator Cole.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could you explain the further resources? Just where would they get the money to do this? These are attorneys that deal with the federal government, kind of a real important thing for our federal land use issues that come up. Could you explain if there's a mechanism to backfund these positions, or how they'll accomplish the same task without these 2 positions? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Gurrow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. once again, we weren't trying to signal this out, but in two other sections, which we'll be talking about, there's close to $7 million in resources for litigation just for this and other purposes. So that was, they thought there were other pools of funds that were available to achieve the same result.
Hearing no more questions, section 15 is closed. The next section, hearing no further question, the next section for our consideration is section 20, Department of Environmental Quality. Senator Larson.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I bring you Section 20, Department of Environmental Quality. You can find that on the summary, page 5, and in your budget bill on page 21. This is pretty simple. Joint Appropriations Committee adopted the governor's recommendation of $79,696 from Special Revenue Fund, of which $15,940 are one-time for salary adjustment for uranium recovery program staff. This is a fee program, and those paying the fee agree that this is a good way to go. This employee is needed. Are there any questions?
Hearing no further questions, section 20, Department of Environmental Quality is closed. Next section for our consideration is section 24, State Parks and Cultural Resources. Senator Driscoll.
Mr. Chairman, I bring you section 24, State Parks and Cultural Resources, on page 6 of the summary sheet and page 22 of the budget. Folks, what the JEC did was, the first one was they included the appropriation for We the People on the next line down, humanities initiatives, and on the third line down, the Centennial Farm and Ranch Program. Those had been excluded from the budget, and what they did was actually took those and used general fund dollars and reinserted them in the program. They had been cut out, put all three back in, and used general fund dollars, not dollars from within. The next one down is back to what we were talking earlier. That is the mini flex that they used on footnote 5. And what this did was prevented transfers within on the mini flex that prevents them from transferring from the 100 series. Keeps that in, and you're gonna hear that over and over again. We did it, like I said, 8 times. The last line was they reduced $3,338,756 general fund for the High Plains Research Station in Arboretum. And that took that project down to where it was just money spent and left it as is. That closes the section. I'd stand for any questions.
Any questions? Hearing no further questions, section 24, State Parks and Cultural Resources closed. Next section for our consideration is section 27, State Construction Department. Senator Guru.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I bring you section 27, the State Construction Department. It's on your summary sheet on page 6, and it's on page 25 in the book itself, but it's just a little bit of a story there behind that. As we got going with our friends down the hall, we all decided jointly that state construction would be turned over to its own bill, which is working its way through the House at this time. So the only operative thing in the budget that sits before you while we wait for that to come down the hall is the last footnote. We did adopt Gov's rec of 2.8 billion, right? Yeah, for school major maintenance. No, 2.8, look. 2 million, that's, sorry. It's folded over on the corner for me. 2,887,000, there it is, 621 for major maintenance, and added footnote number 1 from the original budget request on page 30. I'm glad to stand for any questions on that.
Hearing no further questions, section 27 is closed. The next section for our consideration is section 37, State Engineer. And for an explanation, Senator Larson.
Mr. Chairman, I bring you section 37, State Engineer.
It can be found on page 7 of your summary, and this is not in the budget. JAC denied the governor's recommendation of $401,500 from a water development account 1, of which $80,033 is one time. The remainder is biannualized for budget fiscal year 2027, and 3 full-time equivalent positions for Division 4, Cocaville Field Office. JAC also denied the governor's recommendation of $48,000 general funds one time for the North Platte River Basin Modeling Project. Are there any questions?
Hearing no further questions, the next section for our consideration is agency number 39, Wildlife Natural Resource Trust Fund. For an explanation on this section, Chairman Salazar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I do bring section 39, Wildlife Natural Resource Trust, which can be found on page 7 in your SR or page 26 in your budget bill. This section is rather straightforward. The JAC decreased the governor's rec of $130 million one time by $30 million to $100 million for natural disaster mitigation loans, and then simply moved this to section 346. And then finally, the JAC did adopt the governor's rec of $11 million from the general fund one time for invasive plants and grass mitigation. And with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Senator Land.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just was wondering if the governor's rec was always a loan program on the natural disaster mitigation, and if so, just wondering how that loan program is going to work. Is that aimed at some of the disasters we had this past summer? Just wondering a little bit more about that mitigation loan.
Senator Salazar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, to the honorable senator, the answer is yes. However, I will say this. It is a loan program now, but there will be other legislation, I think, coming forward that may change that loan to something other than a loan.
Thank you.
So I'll leave it at that right now.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay.
Hearing no further questions, section 39, Wildlife Natural Resource Trust Fund is closed. The next section for your consideration is agency number 45, Department of Transportation. For an explanation on this, Senator Larson.
Mr. Chairman, I bring you section 45, Department of Transportation. It is on page 8 of your summary sheet and page 28 of your budget, and this simply restores the mini flex. Ask if there's any questions.
Any questions? Hearing no further questions, section 45 is closed. Next section for our consideration is section 48, Department of Health. Senator Larson.
Mr. Chairman, I bring you section 48, Department of Health. It's on page 9 of the summary sheet and page 29 of the budget. And I will refer to footnote 1 first. JAC denied the governor's recommendation of $2,390,270 one time for maternity care rate rebasing. Item 2, JAC denied the governor's recommendation of $1,666,306 one time for Medicaid behavioral health rate rebasing. Footnote number 4, JAC added $7,720,000 divided equally between the general fund and federal funds, one time for home community-based services for provider who support persons with developmental disabilities. I think I must have them. And then we go to footnote 7, JAC reduced $1,226,107 general fund and 13 vacant full-time equivalent positions. Item number, footnote 11, JAC reduced $100,060 general fund and 1 vacant full-time equivalent position. Footnote 7 and 11 combined has a reduction of $1.4 million and 14 vacant positions which were open for over 40 months. I open for questions.
Questions? No further questions. Section 48, Department of Health is closed. Next section for our consideration is Agency 49, Department of Family Services. Senator Driscoll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I bring you section 49 on page 10 of the summary sheet and page 36 of the budget. Folks, the JEC adopted the first two governor's recs for adult protective services and independent living program. They amended footnote number 8, which had to do with room and board reimbursement. And it used to go to group homes, residential treatment centers, board of cooperative and educational technical services facilities. We added in community crisis centers to it. And then we also sideboarded this appropriation to say that the funds shall not be transferred or expended for any other purposes outside of these uses. And that concludes the agency. I would stand for questions.
Questions? No question on Agency 49. Oh. Senator Anderson.
Did I understand him to say footnote 8? My bill only has footnote 1, 2, 3. Am I looking at the wrong one? Are we on 49, Department of Family Services?
Mr. Chairman.
We're on Agency 48, Department of, no, we're on
49.
Correct, we're on Agency 49, Department of Family Services.
So the third footnote at the bottom is actually footnote number 8, if you look at it, if you go to the budget. So it's number 3, and then it is footnote 8. So if you go to the budget, you'll find that footnote number 8 in the budget is actually that. So thank you.
All right, thank you.
Any more questions on Agency 49, Department of Family Services? No question, that section is closed. Next section for our consideration is Agency 57, Wyoming Community College Commission. Senator Smith.
Mr. Chairman, I bring you section 57, Community College Commission. Find this on page 10 of your summary sheet and page 39 of your bill. This is very straightforward, Mr. Chair. The JAC adopted the governor's rec of $390,000 to reduce the number of B11s needed during the biennium. I'll stand for questions.
Questions? No questions. That section is, hearing no further questions, section 57, Community College Commission is closed. Next agency for our consideration is Agency 60, Office of State Lands and Investment. Chairman Salazar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I bring you section 60, State Lands and Investments, which can be found on page 11 in the SR or page 41, the budget bill. I want to bring to your attention at the bottom, if you're on the SR, 4 items. First of all, the JAC adopted the governor's rec of $20 million from the general fund one time to replenish the emergency fire suppression account. Number 2, the JAC adopted the governor's rec of $20 million, general fund one time, to repay the 2024 Wyoming session laws. This is the fire borrowing loan. And then the JAC did added $2.75 million from the general fund for 1 full-time equivalent FTE position and 4 seasonal part-time equivalent positions for additional single-engine air tankers operations, and this is an ongoing appropriation. And then finally, the JAC decreased the governor's rec of $20.1 from the general fund one time by $5.1 million. We made it to $15 million general fund for the mineral royalty grant program. And you can see that budget request on page 34. And that is it, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions? No questions? Hearing no further questions, Agency 60, Office of State Lands and Investments is closed. Next section for our consideration is Agency 66, Wyoming Tourism Board. For an explanation, Senator Guerrero.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I bring you section 66. It's on page 12 of your SR, but it's not found in your bill. All that really went on there is that in number 1 footnote there, you see on page 12, that the JAC decreased or denied the Govs rec of $488,127 from the, and 127 from S14. That's the Wyoming tourism account, of which 97,000 is a one-time salary adjustment, and that is found on the original budget on page 18. I'd be glad to stand for any questions.
Any questions? No question. Next section for our consideration is section 66, Wyoming Tourism Board. Oh, we just did
That was tourism board.
Yep.
UW next.
You're just too quick for me. Okay. Next section for our consideration is Agency 67, University of Wyoming. For an explanation, Senator Smith.
Mr. Chair, I bring you section 67, University of Wyoming, page 12 in your summary report, summary sheet, and page 44 of your bill. Mr. Chair, the JAC denied the governor's rec for $1.5 million general fund one time for an estimated NCAA settlement agreement. The JAC then increased the governor's rec of $500,000 general fund to $550,000 general fund to establish a new agreement with the University of Utah School of Medicine for 5 students seeking a medical degree, and added the footnote number 15 to make the funds ongoing. And lastly, the JAC amended footnote number 12 to specify that no funds, again, no funds from the state, aid and endowment and matching appropriations shall be expended for any DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion program, activity, or function. Mr. Chair, I'll stand for questions.
Senator, we'll go with Senator Landon, then Dockstader, then Kolb, and then Smith. So Senator Landon, you're on deck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question on footnote 1, the denial of the 1.5 million. Just wondering, that NCAA settlement is more than likely coming. Wondering what the thinking of the Joint Appropriations Committee was on that, and where the university is going to come up with that money. Thank you.
Senator Smith, let's have him answer these one at a time, if we will.
One at a time. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Much appreciated. The thought was that it didn't rise to the level of an emergency, and that this budget session is for emergencies, and we felt that it wasn't within our means to do.
We still got a few in front of you. Next was Senator Dockstader.
Thank you.
Question.
A follow-up to that is attending a dinner meeting with the university over there, and it sensed that the report was that this one wasn't going to go away, and they needed that funding. So they don't now?
Senator Smith.
I can't answer for the university, my honorable senator, but does any of my other members of the Appropriations Committee, would you like to answer that question? Because it really, this is not the appropriate, in our minds, it's not the appropriate session to allocate funds that way.
So I'm going to go out of order, Senator Guru, to help Senator Smith phone a friend. So if you've got the answer to that question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, we had quite a bit of discussion on that about where that money could come from in the university. And frankly, at the time, it was felt by the JAC, I'm saying they're right, just saying there's the feeling of the JAC that they had other pools of resources of which to get that money. They came to us to ask for it from the general fund, and we just felt they had other means to resolve that financially.
So I'm going to go to Senator Kolb, and then to you, Senator Scott, and then to Crum. Senator Kolb.
Mr. Chairman, the good senator from a very windy city in the central part of the state answered the question, or gave the question I was going to ask. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, so now we're going to go to Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, got a question on the item number 2 here, the new agreement, University of Utah for 5 Wyoming students seeking a medical degree. Mr. Chairman, I can see the need for expanding our training of medical doctors. We have a shortage. In my community, it's being made rapidly worse. And my question is, why University of Utah as opposed to expanding our very successful WWAMI program with the University of Washington?
Senator Smith.
Mr. Chair, great question. And the answer is that the Utah is a lot closer than the state of Washington. We felt it was a good investment to see if we could increase the number of people seeking medical degrees that would stay in the state of Wyoming.
So I'm going to ask a question. Senator Driscoll, you going to help answer that question? So Senator Driscoll.
Mr. Chairman, there was fairly extensive discussion on this. That facility already has facilities in southern Wyoming. They have a couple spots open already. They reached out to Wyoming. They're interested in expanding and placing doctors inside our state. This is a ramp-up program that probably will look much like WWAMI in the future. This is the first class of probably many more to come, and Utah has shown a great want to reach out and partner with Wyoming, and they're shouldering a big part of this. We felt like in the committee that it was really a good investment, and it hedged our bets, kind of let us to two places at once.
Senator Crum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just back to footnote number 1 on the $1.5 million. Just want to take a moment and explain where that all came from and what it is and why it isn't an emergency. So the NCAA, there's something called NIL, name, image, and likeness out there. We may agree with it or disagree with it, but it's a rule. Players now can go out and partner with companies and receive money for advertising. They can go to a Ford dealership and show up and get paid some money to do it or whatever else. And then, of course, on the big national level, which we don't have, they can partner and be on national TV commercials and that type of thing. And you've probably seen some of that. What happened was a group of players, that's taken place now over the last couple of years, but for the previous 10 years before that, that group of players did not receive any money. There was a lawsuit. It's called the House lawsuit. And so you'll start to hear things about the House settlement. It has nothing to do with the form of a house. It's the name of the person that sued. Last name was House. So that lawsuit against the NCAA and its members' institutions, which the University of Wyoming is, was over $4 billion in back pay that they had to pay. It just happened several months ago, so this was an unforeseen thing that could have been planned for last year, and they have to make the payment. The payment to the University of Wyoming has to pay into that lawsuit is $3 million. The University of Wyoming is asking for $1.5 million to help pay this unforeseen settlement lawsuit that was unable to be projected a year ago, or it would have been in their budget a year ago. So this is something that was unforeseen. That's why we have supplemental budgets. University of Wyoming has agreed. It's not like they haven't said, well, state, you pay it all. They're going to pay $1.5 million, and they're asking for the state to help match that with $1.5 million to pay this settlement that they're owed $3 million out of a $4 billion. Thank goodness we're not Ohio State or somebody like that, right? Big settlement money. But anyway, that's what it is. It is an emergency. They need to pay it. It is an unforeseen expense, and I would highly recommend, and I will be bringing an amendment to this effect that we have that back in there. But that's what it is, and that's where it came from, and it is unforeseen.
Senator Smith.
If there are no further questions, Mr. Chairman, that concludes the explanation for Section 67, the University of Wyoming.
Hearing no further questions. Oh, there we go. So let me get your speaker on, Senator. Senator Doxson.
Not necessarily a question, but when I was on Committee 10 this summer and working with a member from the other side of the building, we made a couple of trips down to the Wasatch Front to meet with that university. We see great promise working with that university on our medical program. I've even reached out to those who worked with healthcare in this state, and I asked them specifically, what communities could we put doctors in? How can we make this work, especially in rural Wyoming? And so, to my good colleague from Bates Creek, we're working this, spending my own time and dime, working the Wasatch Front to bring this together. I think it brings a lot of promise to healthcare in Wyoming.
So, Senator Salazar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to echo, this is a worthwhile program, and the general consensus on the JAC was to protect us. We fully understand that rural Wyoming needs physicians. That's why we are funding it to this extent. And for those of you who are interested in this program, we're not trying to harm it in any way. So thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Rothfuss.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. And to be clear, this isn't a competition with WWAMI. WWAMI is an incredibly successful program. We've invested in it. We have amazing returns on that investment. This is in addition to, and I think it's important to realize that, I think this is a program that's worth supporting. WWAMI doesn't meet the needs of the state in terms of producing the doctors and practitioners that we need. So we needed to diversify really our options, and this is an excellent potential partnership that will add to what we're gaining from WWAMI and still probably be insufficient at the end of the day. We'll still want more, but this is a great start in that direction, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Scott, do you have a question?
Mr. Chairman, further on this particular issue. Mr. Chairman, WWAMI does an excellent job in producing exactly what we need, and it doesn't sound like there's any attempt, as I understand it, to downgrade our WWAMI participation. So that's fine. I would point out to the Senate that it's not just rural Wyoming that needs the doctors. Urban Wyoming needs them back, too.
Yeah, I can testify that over in the Tri-Cities area of Carbon County, down near Baggs, Dixon, and Savory. We could use a few more doctors down there. Senator Smith.
Mr. Chair, we need more doctors in this state, no doubt about it. So if there are no further questions, Mr. Chair, this time, that concludes the explanation of Section 67, University of Wyoming.
Hearing no further question, Agency 67, University of Wyoming is closed. Next section for our consideration is Agency 70, Enhanced Oil Recovery. Senator Larson.
Mr. Chairman, I bring you Section 70, Enhanced Oil Recovery Commission. You can find this on page 12 of your summary, and it's not found in your bill. JAC denied the governor's recommendation of $279,401 general fund for additional staff, including one petroleum engineer or geologist and an administrative office specialist.
Questions? Senator Lamb.
Mr. Chairman, just real quickly, we had testimony on a couple of bills that came through the Senate earlier in this session, and it seemed to me that we had some new things going on that might demand a little bit of extra help in that office. So maybe a little bit more conversation about, are they going to be able to stand up these new programs that were presented in those bills? That's my question.
Senator Larson.
Mr. Chairman, going on the theme of what the Joint Appropriations Committee has been going on is if these were really needed, we're wondering why they weren't brought last year. And so that's kind of what the Joint Appropriations came up with.
Any questions? Hearing no further questions, Agency 70, Enhanced Oil Recovery. The next section for our consideration is going to be Agency 77, Enterprise Technology Services. Senator Brewer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I bring you Section 77, ETS. It's on SR page 13 or 53 in your budget. And let's see. If you look, there are 3 footnotes. I'm just going to talk about a couple of them. On number 1, JAC denied the Gov's rec of $957,832 general fund one time for F5, that's being aware system hardware replacement. 2, we denied the Gov's rec of $462,800 with general fund one time for transition support service for the ServiceNow applications to the state's internal platform team, and that was from original budget request page 18. I'd be glad to stand for any questions.
Questions? Senator Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could you please explain what F5 system hardware is? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Oh, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Drew.
Thank you very much. That's a great question, and I have in my notes that it is called Being Aware, and I will get you a further answer of what that system is in just a moment. I'm not aware of being aware, but I will get aware and be over to see you, and then I won't be aware. Thank you, Mr.
So
Chairman.
Senator Drew, I'm just wondering if you have any friends out there.
No, well, I have many, I'm sure, but none of them wish to speak right now about being aware.
All right, Senator Drew will get the answer for that for you for Senator Cole. We'll have that second reading. No further questions. Section 77, Enterprise Technology Services is closed. Next section for our consideration is Agency 80, Department of Corrections. Senator Salazar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is Section 80, Department of Corrections, which can be found on page 13 in your SR and page 80 on your budget bill. So the JEC adopted the governor's rec of 9.3 from the general fund one time for out-of-facility inmate housing. As you know, we are having trouble hiring for the Department of Corrections for us to house our own. And until we do that, we are going to have to house inmates out-of-state. And so that's what this is dealing with. The JEC adopted the governor's rec of $454,000 from the general fund, of which $130,000 from the general fund is one time for therapeutic community treatment beds. And then we also adopted the governor's rec of 1.4 from the general fund for adult community corrections program. Both those requests can be found on page 20 in the budget book and page 23 on the budget book. If I may make one more statement, Mr. Chairman, not pertaining to this section, but to other sections. And I know we have some new senators here. Just remember that the Joint Appropriations Committee is comprised of 7 House members and 5 Senate members. And what we do is vote, and the Senate doesn't always get what we want. So I'm looking forward to second reading and third reading amendments. If you have ideas that once looking at this kind of a 30,000-foot look here, then I encourage you to do so. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, appreciate it.
And just to provide just a little bit of editorial to our good chairman back there, when I served on appropriations, we affectionately called that a cram down by our colleagues across the building.
Well,
and so Senator Steinmetz, you have some narrative you'd like to add to this discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just some questions on the Department of Corrections. I know a lot of our counties have built up some infrastructure to be able to house inmates across the state. I was just wanting to know if they were contacted about this shortage of beds before we sent them out of state. I know we've seen studies in the past where our inmates come back much more violent when they are housed out of state. So just a little more discussion on that, please.
Senator Salazar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To answer your question, no, but I will obviously look into that. But I will tell you, as the good senator knows as well, this has been an ongoing problem for years. And so, as I said earlier, they are having a hard time for a number of reasons simply hiring. But to answer your question directly, I have not personally asked that question, but I will do so in the future. Thanks.
Senator Nethercott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the practice of moving inmates in and out of state is very, very common. And the majority of states do it for a variety of reasons. And oftentimes it has to do with safety of the inmates. If there's a safety concern for that inmate in a particular facility, you have an exchange with another. Access to medical within a Department of Corrections facility in light of the unique, perhaps, medical condition of an inmate, their gang affiliations, and so the prisons in other states, they have a relationship with each other, and they know to trade inmates that are high problems, and they will move them around. They are responsible for the safety of those inmates, and they do a very good job with that. Certainly, there are some inmates that would like to complain about being transferred out of state, but that responsibility is on our Department of Corrections Director, who does an incredible job, and our DOC does an incredible job ensuring the safety and security of our facilities and our inmates and the staff associated with that. And with all the years that I've been involved with that, I've never heard a report that the inmates are coming back to Wyoming and they are unmanageable within our own prison system. So I don't think that that is particularly true, whereas I'm confident some of them don't like being transferred.
Senator Cole.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And to continue that conversation, Sweetwater County has a very large facility for housing inmates. And I know that our sheriff would certainly be amenable to a conversation if there was one about increasing that daily count of inmates, because, you know, as we all know, the cost is kind of fixed. And the more folks get in there, the better off it is for the jail. I would certainly appreciate that we would reach out to our facilities and try to utilize them in-state, if at all possible, without endangering any said parties. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, as I understood the explanation on the item number 1, where you approved the governor's recommendation of $9 million, the real problem was inability to fully staff our prisons. And my first question is that a correct understanding? Second question is that a further symptom of the problems we're having generally with an inadequate or non-functioning, not adequately functioning human resource department for the whole state government?
Senator Salazar, boy, that's a hot potato.
Mr. Chairman, so I want to choose my words carefully here. First of all, I want to say that, in my opinion, the Director of Correction is doing an incredible job. So with regard to, I know that there are costs in housing inmates outstate as well as in-state, and I know that he's looking at what is most economical to the state. To get to the good senator's question, but again, I will ask that question, but I think I know the answer, that he's doing everything in his power to have dollars go as far as they can. With regard to the question, yes, it's my understanding the answer is yes. However, to the second part of your question, I won't address that specifically. I will look to see if I can get an answer, a general answer on the statewide issue. So thank you for that question.
Any more questions? No further questions. Agency 80, Department of Corrections, is closed. Next agency for our consideration is 85, Wyoming Business Council. For an explanation, Senator Larson.
Mr. Chairman, I bring you Section 85, Wyoming Business Council, page 14 on your summary and page 56 on your budget. We just have one footnote. JAC reduced $14,375,000 general fund for the Business Ready Communities program. I'd stand for questions.
Questions? Hearing no further questions, Section 85, Wyoming Business Council, is closed. Next section for our consideration is Agency 96, State Budget Department. For an explanation, Senator Driscoll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I bring you Section 96, State Budget Department, page 14 on your summary sheet and page 57 in the budget. Folks, the only change we did on this at all is the standard footnote we did, which is the mini flex. We did a restoration of Section 307 of Section 347, which makes sure they stay in their lane. Would stand for any questions.
Any questions? No further questions on Agency 96, State Budget Department. That section is closed. Next section for our consideration is Agency 101, Supreme Court. Senator Driscoll.
Mr. Chairman, I bring you Section 101, Supreme Court, on page 14 of your summary sheet and page 58 of the budget. There was Positions added is all we did on this, so we followed the court's recommendation, which was to add 2 positions. One is an education coordinator, one which is a record specialist, which adds $180,708 ongoing, and filled the court's recs. With that, I'd stand for any questions.
Questions on Agency 101, Supreme Court. Hearing no questions, Section 101, Supreme Court is closed. Next section for our consideration is State Agency number 157, District Attorney, Judicial District number 7, Senator Driscoll.
Mr. Chairman, I bring you Section 157, District Attorney, Judicial District number 7, page 15 of your summary sheet and page 62 of the budget. Similar to the last, we followed the court's recommendation, which is 3 new positions, which is for an attorney, a legal assistant, and another attorney. So this will be 2 new attorneys and 1 legal assistant, $452,300 ongoing expense. That is the court's recommendation, and I would stand for questions or ask the questions. Session to be closed.
Any questions? Senator Cole.
Mr. Chairman, I guess the justification, a little explanation about why this is necessary to grow the government in this particular area. Just like to know a little bit more about it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Driscoll.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to get back on part of, I'm not positive, I may be able to look to my left right here to the good attorney. Judicial District 7, I am not positive which district that is, and she may be able to answer it better.
Senator Nethercott.
Mr. Chairman, that's Natrona County Judicial District. As you may have seen in the news recently, there is an attorney shortage, which I bring up yearly in debate about the crisis, about not having enough attorneys in the state. But in all sincerity, as we know, we actually do need more attorneys, particularly county attorneys and public defenders, those who are willing to serve in public service. It is becoming quite a challenge for those offices to continue to facilitate all of the new crimes that we create and investigate a changing social circumstance. And so this is for the office of the Natrona County District Attorney in Casper, Wyoming.
Mr. Chairman.
Oh, boy, that was quick. I'm going to go over to Senator Guru.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to take off on that just a little bit, I want to make sure everyone understands that each one of these district attorneys from each of these judicial districts is onto itself. It's their own budget, it's their own house. So as far as it's not necessarily some big mission creep or anything that's starting across the judicial system. As the good majority floor leader stated, it's something that's going on in Casper based on the size of their population and their court itself. But this is just one court and asking for this one in this one district.
Senator Landon, do you have a question?
Just real quickly, Mr. Chairman, this situation up in Casper, we have 2 of these attorneys. The rest are county attorneys out across the state. These 2 offices, since they're budgeted a little bit differently, it's been a long time since we've given any help to that particular office. We ran into it on our joint Judiciary Committee during the interim. We actually went over and met with this attorney in Casper, and this is a much needed, those dockets are incredibly full. We're backed up, and so I really salute the Joint Appropriations Committee for stepping up on this one. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further questions? No more questions. Agency 157, District Attorney, Judicial District 7 is closed. Next agency for our consideration is agency number 205, Education School Finance. Senator Smith.
Mr. Chairman, I bring you Section 205, Education School Finance, on page 15 of your summary and page 62 on your bill. Mr. Chair, the JAC decreased the superintendent's letter of $121,500,000 to $107,700,000 for increased payments to school districts for entitlements, special education, and an ECA for 25-26 school year. Of the total amount, the superintendent's letter, as amended by the JAC, $35 million, gotta get a little closer, my eyes aren't as good as they used to be, 39,900,000 is for the entitlement payments to school districts, largely due to local revenue ad valorem taxes. 35,300,000 is for projected K-12 funding for special education reimbursement obligations, and 38,500,000 is for the ECA during the 25-26 school year. All of this comes from the school funding account, Mr. Chair. I'll stand for questions.
Any questions? Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, my question frankly is why the reductions? I suspect they may be justified, but I do, if it's enough money, I think we need to know why.
Senator Smith.
Mr. Chair, with all of the experience on this this committee, I think that I should phone a friend and
They're not
question,
jumping
but-
up, Senator Smith. Senator Guru.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make sure I understand the good tall senator from Bates Creek question. Is he speaking about the ECA itself?
Senator Scott, could you please clarify your specific question? Is it all or specific items in the school foundation program that were reduced or changed by the JAC?
Mr. Chairman, basically, it's all, it says they decreased the amount by 13,800,000 and et cetera. Why the changes? I understand the change, I don't understand why.
Senator Guru, you want to take a stab at that? And then you got a backup back there with the chairman. Oh, the chairman said he'd field that one.
You go.
So Chairman Salazar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So to answer your question, the ECA has always been, as the good former chairman knows, has always been an issue of judgment and contention. What should be that number? And I will go back to what I said earlier. We have 7 members of the other chamber. We have 5 members from this chamber. We understand that we are in the midst of litigation. And so we wanted to bring a reasonable number that we thought would balance the interests of both those issues. And this is the number we came up with. I will tell you that no one is going to agree on a number. This is the consensus that we could get. I know that's a sloppy answer, but it's a political issue, as you well know, Honorable Senator. So I don't have a neat, concise answer for you. All I can tell you is that it is a very contentious issue. This is the best we could do. And again, I will say to the honorable members, you have second and third reading to express your interest or difference of opinion with regard to this issue.
Senator Kolb, and then we'll go back to you, Senator Scott.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So would you want it to go lower or higher? I mean, what's the JAC recommendation? I realize you're dealing with the body or the group. Where are you at? I mean, it sounds like it's an arbitrary number, and I guess I'd like to know if you're good with this, or what do you think about going up or down? Not being in that said committee and not having to abide by those circumstances. I appreciate the opinion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So, Chairman Salazar, Mr. Vice
Chairman,
President.
The number that you have in front of you is the number. That's the number that we came up with. That's the number that we are bringing before you today. But my point is, if you have a disagreement on that number, bring an amendment. Let's have a discussion method. This is what the Joint Appropriations Committee came up with to you on this number. So again, Senator?
So Senator Scott You gotta finish this out, and then we'll go back to see if Senator Smith has anything he'd like to add.
Mr. Chairman, if the decrease, as I understand it, is of the $13.8 million decrease, if I understand it, if the issue is over the ECA that was recommended this year, I will say I support that decrease. On the Education Committee in the interim, I voted against the recommendation to increase the ECA, so I think maybe the Appropriations Committee's done good work here, Mr. Chairman.
Well, that's an endorsement of the good work by our Appropriations Committee, and now we're gonna hear from Senator Rothfuss.
With less so, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, and to the question, I think there was a little bit of specifics, but it's my understanding that there are 4 categories for the ECA for education. That's professional staff, non-professional staff, materials, and energy. And that the decision by the overall Joint Appropriations Committee was to eliminate the ECAs entirely in 3 of those categories and support the professional staff only. So I guess, and I won't hold you responsible for the explanation, but was there an explanation or justification for why that would be a constitutional approach to limiting the ECA, where it's basically picking one category of ECA as being an acceptable category and then effectively denying the other 3?
Senator Larson, I'd love to answer that question, but that's not my job, so
Well,
we're gonna go to you.
I'm going to give it a try. These are the percentages that we did on those 4 items that you talked about. For professional labor, the percentage was increased 4.76. For the non-professional, it was increased 5.41%. For the educational materials, it was increased 1%. And it was a negative number for energy because that went down, and it was a minus 6.2%. And I think for teacher salaries, it was 6.78%. So we tried to divide it out to make it even, I guess.
Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, one thing about the comment on constitutionality. Mr. Chairman, we should be very clear. The constitutional appropriation for any item, including education, is the appropriation that this legislature makes. It is in the American form of government and under our Constitution and under the federal Constitution as well. It is the responsibility of the legislative branch to appropriate money. It is not the responsibility of the judicial branch. And Mr. Chairman, if we appropriated it, it's constitutional.
Well said. Senator Smith, would you like to bring us home on this issue?
Yes. Mr. Chair, if there are no further questions, that concludes the explanation on Section 205, Education and School Finance.
Hearing no further questions, Section 205, Education School Finance is closed. The next section for our consideration is Section 038, Gaming Commission, and for an explanation, Senator Guru.
Mr. Chairman, place your bets. It's the Wyoming Gaming Commission. Direct your attention to Section 38 on SR page 15 and 65 of the budget. Basically, all we did here, Mr. Chairman, if you look down to footnote 1, you're going to see that old friend coming back again about superflex down to miniflex and keeping people in their lane as far as how they can adjust dollar amounts inside their pay bands and inside their budget bands. Be glad to stand for any questions. Hearing none, I guess we'll.
All right, hearing no further questions on Agency 38, Gaming Commission. That section is closed. Next section for our consideration is Section 300P, Budget Balance or Transfers. Chairman Salazar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this again is a budget balance or transfer. The JAC decreased the governor's rec as found on the governor's profile of 116.9. This was modified because of the January 2025 Craig report, which you all received. We changed it to 46.9, which gave us 70 million, and directed the state auditor to transfer that 70 million from the Legislative Stabilization Reserve account, LSRA, to the general fund. And as all of you know, this is an ongoing budget balancer. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So, hearing no questions, section 300P, budget balance or transfers. Oh, Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, the question I have, since this is the general budget balancer, it is my impression that this budget, as it comes to us from the JAC, Mr. Chairman, is much closer to a true supplemental budget than the nearly general budget items we've seen in general sessions in some of the previous years. And if that impression is correct, I would like to express my compliments to the Joint Appropriations Committee.
Senator Scott, was there a question there or just providing an accolade?
Am I right?
Senator Salazar.
Mr. Chairman, and I'll be sending a check to him. The answer is yes. Thank you. Yes.
All right. Hearing no further questions, section 300P, budget balance or transfer is closed. Next section for our consideration is section 301B, borrowing authority, cash flow, and executive programs. Senator Larson.
Mr. Chairman, I bring you section 301B, borrowing authority, cash flow, and executive programs. JAC, this can be found on your summary page 16 and your budget page 68. Joint Appropriation Committee adopted the governor's recommendation to modify 2024 Wyoming Session Laws, Chapter 118, Section 301B, to increase the loan authority limit to $30 million from the LSRA. JAC also eliminated the requirement that they need to exhaust the governor's special contingency and Homeland Security disaster contingency first. That is all I have. I'm ready for questions.
Hearing no further questions on section 301B, borrowing authority, that section is closed. Next section for our consideration, section 303, carryover appropriation. Senator Smith.
Mr. Chairman, I bring you section 303A, G, and H on page 16 on your summary sheet and 69 and 70 of your bill. Mr. Chair, the JAC amended section 303A to exempt the carryover appropriation from section 347, which provided a mini flex for the agency. The JAC also amended section 303G to specify the carryover appropriation could be used only for the Chancery Court. And the JAC amended section 303H to specify the funds shall not be transferred or expended for any purpose other and will revert for any other purpose and will revert on June 30th, 2025. I stand for questions, Mr. Chair.
Questions on section 303, carryover appropriations. Hearing no more questions, section 303 is closed. Next section for our consideration is section 311, concurrence with governor's biennial budget development recommendations. Senator Duro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is, I bring you section 311 of the budget, concurrence with the governor's biennial budget request. Of course, it's on the last page here, 16, but you might want to flip over to page 70 of the budget of the bill itself to make sense of this one. This is an amended section 311, which means we put back some language that was taken out. But it talks about which outlines the legislature's concurrence with the governor's one-time funding recommendations in his request and applied to the budget bill, unless specified differently within the bill.
Any questions on section 311, concurrence with governor's biennial budget request? No further questions. Section 311 is closed. Next section for our consideration is section 318, revisions on prior appropriations. Senator Driscoll.
Mr. Chairman, I bring you section 318, which is on page 71 of the budget, page 16 of the summary. Folks, this is one you're going to want to pay attention to because it's a little bit of a moving target. We actually went ahead and took an action, and the action was to basically revert $30 million out of section 321 E and F, which is energy matching funds, and section 325D, which is appropriation to match federal infrastructure grants. These have a March 15th reversion date, but we have had news come in. There's probably some funds out there that we didn't have captured at the time we did this, so you can expect to see some budget amendments come to bring us in line that's there. It's just a forewarning. I'm only here to bring what we did, but I'm going to tell you that there'll probably be a change coming on it. With that, I'd stand for questions or.
Any questions on section 318, revisions to prior appropriations? No questions. Section 318 is closed. Next section for our consideration is section 323, large energy projects. Senator Driscoll.
Mr. Chairman, I bring you section 323, large energy projects, which is page 73 of the budget, page 16 of the summary sheet. Very similar to the last one. We basically took a good part of up to $100 million of cuts, and we'll be more specific as we come along with budget ends. I also will tie this to the last one. The one thing that we did on both of these was these funds in the past have just been at governor's discretion. Both section 318, section 323 will now come under management council review. They will actually come to management council. They don't necessarily have the ability to stop them or block them, but they're going to know what's happening and take them under review. So it's up to 100 million, and there'll be more coming on budget footnotes or budget amendments. I would stand for questions.
Hearing no further questions on section 323, large energy project, section 320. Oh. Senator Roth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, on the Management Council review concept, I know that we already were getting updates anytime there were expenditures from it, and so that notification was provided anytime a project was authorized through the matching account. I remember getting those over the last couple of years consistently. What's different in this? There's a review process, but there isn't any ability for the Management Council, as I understand it, to stop it or affect the outcome. So what's new or different based on the language?
Senator Driscoll.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Roth just spent a little time downstairs actually reviewing part of this very thing. And the difference is basically what they've been doing is a notification, I believe both the Management Council and the Minerals Committee, of grants that have been making. And really what's going to start happening in the future is as those applications come in, they're going to make them aware of the applications to the Management Council so they understand kind of what's coming that way early. And that came, like I said, we've had some visit on that, so.
Any further questions on section 323, large energy projects? Hearing no further questions, section 323, large energy projects closed. Next section for our consideration is section 332, charter schools in western Wyoming. Senator Driscoll.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I bring you section 332, charter schools in Wyoming, page 73 in the budget, page 16 of the budget sheet. Folks, what this does is just ensconces that in addition to the 4 charter schools that have been authorized in the state of Wyoming, it authorizes a 5th charter school up by our far corner of the state up there, and beds it into the budget again fully. Stand for questions.
Hearing no further questions on section 332, charter schools in western Wyoming, that section's closed. Next section for our consideration is section 342, Wyoming Spanish American War Monument. Chairman Salazar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Section 342 can be found on page 16 on your SR and page 74 on the bill. Honorable members, this is dealing with the Spanish-American War Monument. We specified that the appropriation for the Spanish-American War Monument shall not be transferred or expended for any other purpose and shall not be included in the agency's standard budget for the immediately succeeding fiscal biennium. The cost was $75,000. Mr. Chairman, this may be my last opportunity to mention anything, given how we may end this. I want to simply say to the members, if you look at this, this is the SR that we've all been reading. It's 16 pages. Last year, in the biennium budget, it was 68 pages. So this is 16. Last year in the budget bill was 68. So when we come in 2026 next year, you know, this is a pretty short supplemental budget, but I guess I'm forewarning you, be prepared, because as previous members of the Appropriations Committee knows, this is a relatively short piece of work. But come next year, with 68 pages, it's going to be an entirely different process in terms of the length of time and the deliberation. The other thing I will mention, Mr. Chairman, and I said at the beginning, just a reminder that all amendments are due to the LSO legal staff by the end of Committee of the Whole on Monday for your second reading on Tuesday. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a short, sweet supplemental.
I'll get one for you.
So hearing no more questions on Section 342, American-Spanish War Monument, that section's closed. Next section for consideration is Section 345, Natural Resource Litigation Account. Senator Smith.
Mr. Chair, since this is short and sweet, I just want to add to that last section that my great-grandfather fought in the Spanish-American War before moving to Pinedale, Wyoming, where he homesteaded, and here a descendant of his is over 100 years later. Mr. Chair, I bring you Section 345, page 16 on your summary sheet, and page 74 on the bill. The JAC decreased the governor's rec of $7,500,000 general fund to $3,600,000 general fund, and created Section 345 for natural resource litigation to be used only for legal counsel. I'll add that we repealed the prior law and we are bringing these into Section 345 to protect our core industries, Mr. Chair. I'll stand for questions.
Well, we got a little popcorn going on out here. So Senator Steinmetz, you're the first colonel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe I was up first, so I beat you. Just a summary. So we've appropriated the 3.6. How much was in the account? I know on the Agriculture Committee, we recommended that we refill this completely because we see the need for this. So it's a little concerning to me that we have reduced the number of attorneys and this funding. So if you could please give me the rationale on that, and also how much is in the account, because there may have been some excess, because it says it would revert whatever's in there. So can you just give me the total amount, please?
So Senator Smith, is your preference to handle these one at a time?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
All right, Senator Smith.
Mr. Chair, that is a great question, and I'm not sure that I totally understand it. And I actually will need to defer to somebody else on our team to give me specifics.
You got the captain of the team, Senator Salazar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is a new account. It had 7.5, it now has 3.6. And to the best of my knowledge, that is currently what the numbers are at, so.
Senator Cole, you had a question.
I do still continue to have a question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It says coal-related litigation, and it seems to be limited. So I guess further explanation, I thought this was supposed to be for, you know, all of our industries that are related to, I assume, mining, but what happened here? I'd like to know more about that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, I'm going to go to Senator Smith. This is his section, unless he wants to defer.
I'd like to defer.
All right, who's going to handle this? Senator Nethercott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So there's two different litigation funds. One is for natural resource, one is for coal-related litigation. This is really a combining of those two. So the carryover funds limited to coal-related litigation come back in to this total fund, which makes good sense.
Senator Salazar. Oh. Senator Ide.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question. If it's for attorneys, are those in-house attorneys or outside counsel? Just a quick question. Thank you.
Senator Nethercott.
Mr. Chairman, we are appropriating a significant amount of money, millions and millions of dollars, to private counsel.
As we're trying to stimulate the practice of attorneys in the state of Wyoming. This should be called the University of Wyoming Graduate Guarantee Employment Program. So anyway, Senator Colby, you have another question.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank God we're covering the attorneys here. But getting back to the question about how much money then is set aside if it's a segregated account between, say, coal litigation and other types of natural resource litigation, how much money then is just subtracted out of the, I mean, I guess I don't see it clearly here as a 3.6 out of the 7.5. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Smith, you're going to field this one.
Mr. Chair, 3.6 million has been set aside for the litigation on natural resources. This is to protect our core industries, and I think it's pretty clear that it goes beyond coal here.
Senator Salazar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So to answer the good senator's question, the entire amount will go for all litigation. The specific amount I don't have, but I will get for you when at second reading. So.
All right, any more questions on section 345 natural resource litigation account? No more questions, that section's closed. Next section for our consideration is section 346 natural disaster mitigation loans. Senator Larson, you got this?
Mr. Chairman, I bring you section 346 natural disaster mitigation loans. Page 16 on your summary, page 76 in your budget. JAC decreased the governor's recommendation of $130 million one time by $30 million to $1 million out of the LSRA account as found in section 39 and created section 346 for natural disaster mitigation loans. JAC has specified that each loan shall have an interest rate of 2%, a term of 20 years, and collateral which may be accepted in subordinate lien positions, with administration of the program by the Office of State Lands and Investment and final approval by the State Loan and Investment Board as recommended by the Wyoming Wildlife Natural Resource Trust Board. I stand for questions.
Questions on section 346? Hearing no more questions, section 346, natural disaster mitigation loans is closed. Next section for our consideration is section 347, personal service transfer. Senator Rowe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I bring you section 347. And, we've been talking about this all day, or all afternoon, back and forth. And I just want you to, if you can, if you've got to take a second and go to page 79. Of the bill itself. It's very small writing on page 16 if you'd like to follow along, but I just want to kind of point this out. This is the whole business about flex, mini flex versus super flex. How money can move between agencies, how money can move within agencies within the budget. So section 347, page 79, except as otherwise specifically provided, non-federal fund appropriations for personal services, that's the 100 series, that's payroll, contained in this act shall not be transferred to any other series or expended for any other purpose other than personal services, notwithstanding Wyoming Statute 9-2-1005 BII or any other provision of this act. federal and federal appropriations for contractual service, that's 900 series, contracted in this act shall not be transferred to the personal service 100 series. Then on to line 24, the following appropriations and agencies are exempt from this section. So now these are the ones with superflex authority. Section 2, Section 020 of this act, to the Department of Environmental Quality, and then flip the page over to page 80. Section 2, Section 040 of this act, the Department of Health. Then next section on all those sites to the Department of Corrections. Then in Romanet 4, any other appropriation in this act that specifies that the appropriation shall not be subject to this section. C, the judicial branch is exempt from this section for transfers in a total amount not to exceed $400,000. So folks, this is, as we went through COVID, as we went through a few things over the last few years, we allowed a certain amount of transfers from contractual services to personnel and vice versa. This has been an attempt to bring back that power back to you, bring back that ability so we can see, when we see budgets, when we see the 100 series and we see the 900 series, which are some of our biggest budget items between contractual services and personal services, will be numbers that you can look at and that you can rely on. I'd be glad to stand for any questions.
Any questions? Hearing no questions on section 347, personal service transfers, that section is closed. Next section for our consideration is section 348, Wyoming State Shooting Complex Appropriation. Senator Larson.
Mr. Chairman, I bring you section 348, Wyoming State Shooting Complex Appropriations. You can find this on summary page 16, which we're on, and then budget on page 80. JAC adopted the recommendations of the Governor's Letter Number 2 to authorize the use of previously appropriated funds for the state shooting complex. JAC also adopted the recommendations as proposed by the State Shooting Complex Oversight Task Force and added $3 million Wyoming Tourism Reserve Projects account and $500,000 from the Game and Fish funds for the development, siting, construction, and operation of the Wyoming State Shooting Complex. I stand for questions, and before you close it, I'd like to remind some stuff.
All right, we'll any questions? Senator Landon, you got a question?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Paragraph C, I totally get the $3 million out of the Wyoming Tourism Reserve account. That's become a nice little slush fund over there. But this $500,000 that comes out of the Game and Fish, I'm just not tracking exactly why we need additional hunter safety funds and what that has to do with the shooting complex. I'm just missing the connection there. Thank you.
Senator Larson.
Mr. Chairman, I'm kind of wondering if I might need a call for a little bit help on the phone. And I would hope that I could get help from our co-chair that was on the task force for the state shooting complex.
Senator Rothfuss, could you come up here and take the chair for a minute?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further discussion, Senator Hicks.
So Senator Rothfuss, the answer to my colleague's question is the Wyoming Game and Fish Department was one of the executive branch agencies that sat on this task force all along. You do have a letter on your diocese here. The state of Wyoming received over $150 million in Pittman-Roberts tax, and that's an excise tax on guns, ammunition, and also archery equipment. Those funds are eligible for shooting ranges. Part of those funds, or those federal dollars, are allocated for that. The discussion with the department is because this is going to have a significant component for the Department for Hunter Education, an outdoor education component. They will be intricately involved in the actual final design of the main buildings to provide for those educational opportunities. But it's consistent with the taxes that the department collects under Pittman-Roberts It was a discussion with the department, and they thought that they would be able to cover those expenditures to cover the kind of programs that they see and you're going to foresee running here. Again, 4-H shooting sports, hunter education, and using some of those federal excise tax or the way it's structured, they can use their own funds and use those other excise tax for whatever. It provides all the flexibility in the department. That assumption that a discussion occurred with the tax force and they volunteered to contribute an extra $500,000 to facilitate the responsibilities of the Wyoming Game and Fish Department. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Senator Hicks. Any further discussion on Section 348, Wyoming State Shooting Complex appropriations? Senator Steinmetz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a little discussion on both 348 and 346 kind of look like bills, and traditionally we've tried to keep those out. Was there any discussion about that, about us getting kind of verbose in the budget? Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Steinmetz. Anyone want to address that? Senator Larson, to you.
Mr. Chairman, the joint appropriations just was going by what the governor's letter stated, so I kind of think that's where we came from. I might be getting some help over here.
Little follow-up there, Senator Grew.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, the 300 series, old friend of mine. There have been years where we put the entire Capcom budget for schools, the entire Capcom budget for general state construction in the 300 series when we thought a bill might be problematic, or if we were cutting parts back and forth. These two items got into the 300 series, I think more because it was an ongoing discussion all during the interim about how they were going to be funded, or in the case of the shooting complex, where it was going to be located. And so it was kind of a discussion that evolved since we meet quite often during the summer. I think that was where it naturally ended up, especially with the shooting complex, because there are many moving parts and there was a lot of questions going on all during that. And I got a feeling with a couple of amendments may still be going on. So that was kind of the genesis of that one. And the other, I'm not going to touch it.
Thank you, Senator Grew. Senator Hicks.
If I may, I'll speak to Section 348, the state shooting complex. That was a bill. And that was a bill passed by both bodies with supermajorities in both bodies. In that bill, it specified that those funds were set aside and it required further legislative authorization. And because it did come in the form of a bill, in that bill it said it would come back to this body for final approval. That is why this section's in here, but it was a bill and the bill said it's coming back. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Senator Hicks. Any further discussion on Section 348? Senator Larson.
Mr. Chairman, before you close out, I do want to state that there are some handouts on your desk, some letters from, I think there's 4 or 5 from different entities, and then a brochure on the shooting complex that hopefully you can look at during the weekend.
Excellent. Thank you, Senator Larson. Any further discussion at this time? Seeing none and hearing no further questions, Section 348 is closed. The next section for our consideration is Section 349.
Section 349, Senator Smith.
I bring you Section 349, page 16 on your summary sheet, and 83 on your bill. And I'd like to ask my colleagues to not shoot the messenger. The majority of the JAC adopted Treasurer's letter to authorize the state auditor to transfer $40 million from the general fund to the LISRA for the loan repayment related to the University of Wyoming 2023 capital projects. And the university had a slew of capital projects, and this helped them complete those projects. I stand for questions.
Any questions on Section 349? No question. This section is closed. Members of the body, Madam Majority Floor Leader. Mike who? Mike Guru?
Mr.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the Committee of the Whole rise and report.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same motion. You've heard the motion. Let's see. Motion carries. Mr. President. Yep. And pencil.
Stop.
Preferred, not dis.
Committee of the Whole report.
Mr. President, with respect to the budget bill, Senate File 1, the Committee of the Whole heard explanations as follows. Section number 1, closed. Section 4, closed. Section 6, closed. Section 8, closed. Section 10, closed. Section 11, closed. Section 20, closed. Section 24, closed. Section 27, closed. Section 39, closed. Section 45, closed. Section 48, closed. Section 49, closed. Section 57, closed. Section 60, closed. Section 67, closed. Section 77, closed. Section 80, closed. Section 85, closed. Section 96, closed. Section 101, closed. Section 157, closed. Section 205, closed. Section 38, closed. Section 300, closed. Section 301, closed. Section 303, closed. Section 311, closed. Section 318, closed. Section 323, closed. Section 332, closed. Section 342, closed. Section 345, closed. Section 346, closed. Section 347, closed. Section 348, closed. Section 349, closed. Senator Hicks, Chairman.
Senator Hicks.
Mr. President, I'm just kind of wandering around over here cleaning my desk off. Mr. President, I move the adoption of today's action taken on the budget on Senate File number 1.
All right, you've all heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The report has been adopted. Any reports from standing committees? Okay.
Mr. President, the following reports are dated January 31, 2025. Committee number 10, Labor, Health, and Social Services, to whom is referred Senate File 167, Board of Chiropractic Examiners Criminal History Records, respectfully reports same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Barlow, Crum, Hutchings, Scott, and Steinmetz. Senator Barlow, Chairman. Committee number 3, Revenue, to whom is referred Senate File 151, Monthly Ad Valorem Tax Distribution Amendments. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Case, French, Ide, McEwen, and Pappas. Senator McEwen, Chairman. Committee number 10, Labor, Health, and Social Services, to whom is referred Senate File 158, Virtual Credit Cards and Network Leasing and Dental Services. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Barlow, Crum, Hutchings, Scott, and Steinmetz. Senator Barlow, Chairman. Committee number 3, Revenue, to whom was referred Senate File 185, Governmental Property Taxation and Sale. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with the recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Case, McEwen, and Pappas. No, Senators French and Ide. Senator McEwen, Chairman. Committee number 9, Minerals, Business, and Economic Development, to whom was referred Senate File 186, Advanced Nuclear Reactor Manufacturers Fuel Storage. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with the recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Anderson, Cooper, Jones, Nethercott, and Rothfuss. Senator Anderson, Chairman.
Thank you, Randy. Any messages from the House? None? Reminder to please sign the recognition sheet over here on the table. We have a state championship football team coming in on Monday. We'd like to have this presented to them on Monday, so get your John Hancocks out and sign that bad boy. Okay. That didn't sound good. Okay, back to, that clears the desk. Madam Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. President, I move that we stand adjourned until 10 a.m. Monday, February 3rd, 2025, 10 a.m. Monday. in
February. All right, any announcements? Senator Landon.
Thank you, Mr. President. Looking ahead to Tuesday morning, just a reminder that your Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, Cultural Resources Committee will take up Senate File 132, Protecting Critical Infrastructure and Systems from Drones, Senate File 164, Parimutuel Rodeo Definitions, and if time permits, Senate File 170, Grizzly Bear Management Prohibition. That's down in W4.
All right, thank you, Senator. Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Education Committee number 4 will meet Monday again. Mention it at 8 o'clock, W10 and online. We changed the order around a little bit of our bills, so we're going to go with, continue our talks and our discussion on Senate Joint Resolution 6, School Capital Construction Constitutional Amendment, and then we're going to move Senate File 178 second, Fixing Reading Failure, and Senate File 173, Educational Bankruptcy Act, as time permits.
Thank you. Senator Olson.
Mr. President, your committee number 1, Judiciary, will meet Monday upon noon recess in W2 to consider 3 bills. Senate File 22, Ground for Termination of Parental Rights Guardianship, Senate File 100, Child Witness Courtroom Procedures, and Senate File 180, Supplemental Budgets Limitations.
Thank you. Senator Anderson.
Mr. President, your number 9 committee, Minerals, will meet Monday, February 3rd at noon recess, about 12:30, in Capitol Extension Room W4 to hear 2 bills. Senate File 92, Make Carbon Dioxide Great Again, No Net Zero, and Senate File 134, Industrial Siting Wildlife Mitigation, and we will not change the order. So you can rest assured we'll hear yours first. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Barlow. Oh, yes, sir.
And happy Groundhog Day.
Yeah. Happy Groundhog Day. Happy Groundhog Day. Happy Groundhog Day. Okay. Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your committee number 10, Labor, Health, Social Services, will be meeting Monday, February 3rd, noon recess, W110 to hear 2 bills, Senate File 155, International Physician Licensing, and Senate File 172, Physical Therapy Licensure Compact. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Senate Appropriations Committee will be meeting Monday, February 3rd upon noon recess in room 113. We'll be dealing with Senate File 141, United States Marine Corps Corporal Seth Rasmussen Memorial Highway, Senate File 169, Strategic Investments and Projects Account Repeal, Senate File 189, Uniform Commercial Code Investment, Senate File 191, State Funds Proxy Votes, Pecuniary Investments, and SJ 11, Supporting Anti-ESG Litigation. Another reminder, honorable members, that your amendments need to be in by the close of Committee of the Whole on Monday for second reading. And finally, Mr. President, I want to thank Elizabeth behind me, who's been helping all day today. So appreciate her help.
Hey, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Good job, Appropriations Committee and team. Senator McEwen.
Thank you, Mr. President. The number 3 committee, Revenue, will be meeting Monday, February 3rd in room W6 to discuss Senate File 163, Partial Tobacco Products Tax Repeal, and Senate File 177, Primary Residence Property Tax Fund. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right, thank you. Any further announcements? Hearing none, you've heard the Majority Floor Leader's motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. Senate will stand recess until Monday, February Adjourned, I said recess. Senate shall stand adjourned until Monday, February 3rd at 10 a.m.